Hello and welcome to this Heroes of Black Reach Top Tips video. In this video I'm going to be looking at cards. In Heroes of Black Reach, action cards are used to influence the game by giving special bonuses and by triggering special events that can change the way that the game is progressing. Paying attention to the cards that you have is important because those cards can change the battle in interesting ways. They add an element of surprise to the game and make it difficult for your opponent to predict what's going to happen. So the first thing to say is don't be afraid to use your cards. Since you restock your cards back up to 4 at the end of each turn, then it doesn't really make sense to hold on to them. So if you can find a good use for the card in a given turn, then go for it. Depending on the objectives you have in your game, some cards are well suited to hanging on to the end of the game. So think about the objectives and your goals for the game and see if there are any cards that will turn things in your favour. And then consider hanging on to those cards and using them later for maximum effect. For example, in the late part of the game, when perhaps you only have a couple of orders each, being able to remove an order token from your opponent might be extremely valuable. Whereas earlier on in the game, where you both have 5 or 6 orders, removing one of their order tokens may not be quite so important. So when you're looking at your cards, you need to balance whether you wish to keep those cards into the future and whether they'll be valuable, with them clogging up your hand and not being useful. I'll often look at the card and try to evaluate how many turns it's going to be before that card becomes useful, versus whether or not I can use it for its alternative bonus instead. So if I pick up in turn 1 a card that I think that would be really good in turn 8, I probably won't still have it in turn 8, because I'll have spent it before then. On the other hand, if I pick up a card in turn 6, and I think now that would be good in turn 8, I might still have it in turn 8, because it's not going to have clogged up my hand for so many turns. So when you're looking at your cards, it's important to think about where you are in the game, how long you might hang on to a card, how valuable that card is, and whether or not it's actually almost as valuable just to use it for its alternate bonus, and so on. If you've not really played the game very often, then it's a really good idea before you start to have a look through the different cards that are available in the game. Broadly speaking, both the Orcs and the Ultramarines have a lot of overlapping cards, but there are some unique cards in the two different decks. So if you've maybe only played a couple of games or you haven't played for a while, then I definitely recommend just flicking through the cards and just any you're not that familiar with, just having a read. Because the last thing you want is towards the end of the game your opponent pulling out a card that does something amazing that you didn't even know was possible. In some ways it might even feel like they're cheating if the card is that good. But those cards are all there and you can have a look at them before the start, so don't penalise yourself by not knowing what's possible. Another thing to bear in mind is that there are a maximum of 2 of each type of card in the deck. And generally for the really, really good cards, there's only 1. But if your opponent has played 2 no cards, for example, then you can be confident that there won't be any more no cards coming out, and they won't be able to cancel any more of your cards. So bear that in mind if they've played 2 of any card, that you are then safe from that type of card, and you can factor that into your planning. Try to play your cards when you'll actually gain an advantage from doing so. So for example, if you're in close assault, so let's imagine you're the Ultramarine player, and you've got Sergeant Voralanus, and you're in close assault with a Grot. It would be a waste of your card to add a +1 bonus to your assault, because you already have a huge advantage in that assault. In other words, have a look and make sure that the bonus you're applying will actually have some effect and won't just be irrelevant. Otherwise you'll be wasting a card that could potentially be useful in a different way. Heroes of Black Reach allows you to do a little bit of deck building. So you only have to take 40 cards out of the 50 cards into a battle. So that means you can take out cards that you don't want to use in a particular battle. So if your opponent has no grenades, then perhaps take out the return to sender cards. If your opponent isn't bringing a vehicle, then maybe take out the bogged down card. So think about a little bit of deck building before the game starts, and maybe prune out cards that you don't want to use. Don't forget that you don't have to keep cards between turns. So even if you don't use any of the 4 cards in your hand, you can still discard all 4 of those cards at the end of your turn to draw 4 new ones if you don't like those 4 cards. So you don't have to keep a card in your hand just because you're not able to play it. So in summary, make sure you know your cards, make sure you know your opponent's cards, take out any cards you want, think about hanging on to cards that are really good and might swing the game in your favour, but generally try to use as many cards as you can in a turn and take advantage of the fact that you'll be restocking at the start of next turn. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been useful, and I'll see you next time.